definitely.
Okay. Um, so did you guys get the review that we sent out yet? And I know it has to go through IT to get approved to send to everyone. I sent it like an hour or two ago.
The PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Um, so yeah, I think that should be helpful. That goes objective by objective in the syllabus, so it's pretty thorough. Um, okay. The Kahoot I made, I don't have like the premium account, so it only lets a certain amount of people in, so we're gonna see if it works. You can't join in exactly. You could still go along. But yeah, wait a few more minutes for everyone and then we can get to start. Um, yeah. So I guess we'll just start with that, but if anyone has any questions, we'll try to get through as many of those as well. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
I think it caps at 10 or 20. I think for the next one of these, I'm going to find out how they do the big ones. Um, yeah, I just kind of threw this together this morning. So, um, yeah, we'll do what we can. But can't leave because then we can see it. Right. I guess we'll get started. Any of the other TAs in here, if you guys want to answer any questions in chat. I think what we'll do is we'll go one by one on the questions, and then after each one, we can stop and answer any questions. That sounds good. By the way, I'm Jackson. I'm one of the TAs. That wasn't
Jackson,
aware.
I think that some people are having trouble getting in because it says there's a player limit that got.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know how they do the large ones. Um, Without the player limit, it told me like 10 or 20. It's looking more like 10. Um, So next time we do it, I'll have to find out how they do that because it wanted me to pay uh
Okay.
for that. But everyone can participate, choose your questions, we're here to learn. Yeah, I know it's fun to click the answers, but we'll do our best for today.
You guys can also input your answers into the chat if you want to. I'm Brianna. I'm going to be one of your TAs as well.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I'm Samir. I'm one of your TAs. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, all right?
Yeah, so I guess we can get started. I try to make these questions as basic as possible, so we just get through the fundamentals. If you have more specific questions, we can always go into that. Yeah, let's see if this works. Wait. Give me the fun music. All right. You guys nailed that. Yeah. Um, 74 people as they're showing up. It's crazy. Okay. Um, Let me just see in the chat. All right. Yeah. If there's any questions with that, but let's see here. Yeah, that's the largest amount of waters in your cells. So there should we have a diagram in here. We just talk about it in here. So yeah. 40% intracellular, it's your largest compartment. We're gonna get into the rest of these, how to do the math, and all that later. But these numbers are great to know. Right. We can move on then. Here's the math. Awesome. Just throwing AI pictures in there. I couldn't stop it. All right. Most of you guys got that. So you can use the quick trick. It's basically, well, 1 liter of water is 1 kilogram. So pretty much for a male, men are 60% water. So you just take 60% of 30. That's how you get there. So these work down. There's that rule that people do the um, but I would generally more stick to these rules and the fraction charts because that rule that they throw around only applies to if you are 60%. So it would be better if you use these fractions, the 2/3 and the 1/3. Those charts, that's what I would recommend. Yeah, good point. Make sure you have it in kilograms because it won't work in pounds. So 1 kilogram is 2.2. Yeah, you'd have to use 50 for a female. I've never seen them ask a question where it is a female. So you could probably use the rule, but keep your eye out for that, you know. All right. Let's move on. Yes. Yes, babies are juicy, 75%. They will probably ask something about that. Highest water percentage are children. All right. Yes, I believe the fractions are, well, I would say of that 75%, the fractions are still the same in that, but that's not gonna, um, they won't ask questions like that. At least I don't believe so. Yeah. We'll move on. You guys nailed that. Looking good in the chat. Yeah. Sodium's your major one. That's the one that's gonna be driving your action potentials. Um, yeah, that's the one that changes the most. Potassium is there as well, but sodium by far is the largest effect. A lot of flow changes. And people are thinking ahead to the next ones. All right, let's move on. All right, guys nailed that one too. Yeah, the the albumin, plasma proteins. So yeah, plasma proteins are large and charged, especially the albumin, it's the major one. So that large negative charge that can't pass the barrier will inevitably attract more positive charges to balance it out. Any questions there? We're gonna try to do a review like this before each each of your mods. We will take feedback if this is uh, too easy or too hard. We can always change it. You guys are on top of this so far. Just want it to be helpful. We'll move on. That as well. All right. What's the problem with sodium chloride? Why not that? Exactly. They're charged. Nothing charged can freely move across the membrane. They need some sort of channel or transporter, vesicle. They need something. And why not glucose? Yeah, it's big. Thick with more than two C's, maybe. Yeah, it's big. You guys are doing great. So keep going. Very nice. I hope it's not moving too quick. I don't think I can change it. It's just once everyone gets or these 7 people get their question and it ends. So sorry if you're still thinking. But yeah, just it's good to have your definitions down on amphipathic. It's a molecule that has polar and non-polar regions. So they might ask something in relation to the plasma membrane, and how that has qualities. Yeah, we'll definitely ask something about the plasma membrane, but this is something they like to talk about. But yeah. So we'll move on. No one has questions. Okay, let's do it. Meet our fundamentals. Or foundations, as they say. Very nice. Very nice. That's just something you gotta know, and you gotta know it forever. So get it in your head now. Um, in general, that moves both against concentration gradients. It's really good to know for all the molecules, or all the major ones: sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, bicarb. I would know. Um, I would know which side of the membrane has more and the approximate ratio. I remember the ratio being important. They like to talk about how large the calcium ratio is it like 10,000? Yeah. Um, so that's a big one. The other ones are more like 30, 40. Getting like a general idea of what those should be is in that in mind. But yeah, definitely know which sides have more. It's pretty much outside has more for everything except for potassium. Inside of the cell is more potassium. Okay. So we'll move on. Okay. The ATPase might give it away a little bit. Um, so those are primary active. They use energy directly. Um, what for? That is simply a, a channel that allows for diffusion or facilitated diffusion. Um, yeah, yeah, exactly. So the sodium glucose symporter uses energy indirectly, but NAK ATPase generates the sodium gradient. So sodium's constantly trying to flow into the cell and is pumped out. A little bit is allowed to flow into the cell in exchange for glucose coming with it. Yeah. And in general, in symporter, the molecules are going to move in the same direction, either into the cell or out of the cell together. Antiporters, they're going to move in opposite directions. Yeah. We have to know other examples. I don't think you have to get into it now. Um, but yeah, SGLT1, there's SGLT1, SGLT2. Those are just two kinds of them. You'll get more to it later. Yeah. Right. Any other questions? Good job, guys. That didn't mess you up. SGLT, just abbreviate, is sodium glucose uh, transporter. So that is just a co-transporter that uses the secondary active. So this one always messed me up because I feel like we were At least I was taught since high school. Everything goes high to low, high to low. Um, but water moves in the direction where there are more ions dissolved. So something that has high osmotic pressure has a lot of ions in it. Um, so that's going to draw in more water so that each side has a similar concentration. Um, and in general, you need a, semi-impermeable membrane for any of this to work. If you have a fully permeable membrane, you're never going to get any differences. Everything's just going to diffuse out. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Keep moving. More math for you. Thanks. Yeah. All these osmolarity questions, you'll probably get one. Basically, you have to know that when placed in solution, these compounds are going to dissociate into ions. So in reality, these questions end up being multiply the moles times how many molecules or how many atoms it dissociates into. So 100 millimoles times 3 goes to 300 osmoles. There's a more formal equation where the units work out nice. You should be somewhere in your notes. I believe we have it in the review as well. But to be honest, I never found it helpful. Just knowing how it generally works like that. We'll get through. So, uh, yeah, there's that formal equation that has all the units where they cancel nice. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it should be in the review. Go. So, hypertonic. Yeah, we're going off the same concept as before. Um, red blood cell has a semi-permeable membrane. We're placing it in hypertonic solution, which means the solution has a lot of ions in it, more ions than a red blood cell, which means since there's more ions in the solution, water is going to try to balance and it's going to leave the cell. So it's going to shrivel and shrink. If it was placed in water that doesn't have any ions, then it would swell and burst. That would be hypotonic solution. I wouldn't want to go into reduce. Um, so, water flows in the direction of ions. Um, if water flowed into the cell, the solution would get even higher. It would get even more hypertonic, and the balance would get even more extreme. CFTs. Water would move from the cell. Yeah, it would move from the cell out of the cell, ICFTs. Yeah, that's what causes it to shrink. Is that it loses its water. Does that make more sense? Yeah, the interior of the cell loses the water, which causes the cell to shrink. Yeah. After the cell shrinks, the cell and the solution should be more balanced in terms of tonicity. But yeah. Yeah, so when they say shrinking and swelling, they're talking about what happens to the cell. Yeah. And that refers to how much fluid is inside. That makes sense? Great. Let's keep moving. Oh, it shows both of them. So I think there's a little bit of debate. They're pretty close. I said potassium too when I was making this, but it's technically chloride. Um, According to Costanzo, but knowing they're both -90, -95. Yeah, that's what it is for the textbook. Is chloride is -9, or yeah, -90. Potassium is -95. Um, that's kind of a tricky question. They're not going to ask something this close on the
So,
exam. Yes.
so if they do ask something like this, it would we would choose chloride.
Um, According to Costanzo.
No.
I really doubt they will ask something like this. I can clarify with the professors. But what they want to go off of, because sometimes they go off the book a little bit. But they make it clear when they go off the book. Yeah. Whatever they say in their PowerPoints, I would go off of. Which most of the time it's copied and pasted from Costanzo. Okay. So if they said go by Costanzo, I'd go by that. But I would double check with their notes to see what they say. In general, knowing that they're approximately 90-95 both is going to be good for the exam. At least I think so. I haven't seen the exam. Yeah. So go over whatever review they had today. That said, whatever it's. But they're essentially the same. This is a little bit of a gray area. Um, they'll define it what they mean more uh, on the exam, but basically the peak of the potential. This is talking about before you start gearing up towards hyperpolarization or back down towards polarization. So um, they're not going to ask you a borderline question like that. But picture, yeah. So up here, this is the peak of action potential. So potassium's just starting to come up as sodium's still coming out. Yeah. Yeah. All the sodium channels slam shut. So it's not really too much of like a a gray area where some of them are closing. Um, so yeah, this turnaround point here, it goes up. Your sodium channels are opening here, and then they hit the top, and then they all slam shut. Yeah, yeah, I could have written the question better. Um, yeah, so going off that, I guess you could technically say potassium, but they shouldn't give you a question that's like at the changing point. They would give you during the upstroke, what's more open, and during the downstroke, what is more open. Yeah, so they don't like confusing questions because then they have to. Um, so I should have worded the question most permeable during the upstroke of the action potential. And then that'd be sodium. If it said during the downstroke of the action potential, that would be potassium, most permeable. Okay. Why would you have an action potential at relative refractory period? So basically, um, the difference between absolute and relative is that there's a period where after the peak of the action potential where the sodium channels are completely inactivated, cannot reopen. Um, so if you hit it with another stimulus, no matter what, you can't. Over time, they slowly start to be able to become activated again. Um, and so if you have a strong enough stimulus during the relative refractory period, that would be able to start a new action potential. Find those forces that drive the living potential of a given ion. So do you guys mind answering these questions? Let me just stay on topic. But a lot of this stuff is covered in the review, so I definitely recommend going over it. We don't have as much time to hit everything, every single thing. But we'll definitely get your answers, your questions answered here. But if you don't say something here, it's probably covered. Fine. And if not, we can always go back again. So is that more clear question? Um, yeah, so potassium is your big hyperpolarizer. Our resting potential is approximately -70. Um, during the efflux, potassium is allowed to leave the cell. Normally, we have that really high concentration of potassium inside the cell. So when that is allowed to leave, you're losing positive charges in the cell, which brings the charge back down towards rest membrane. In general, what's going to oppose a ion reaching its potential is going to be what's actively done, like the NAK TPase pump. It's actively pumped against its concentration. Um, it's trying to constantly reach its potential. So the diffusion across through channels, not quite diffusion. But the passive process of that is going to constantly bring it towards its ions potential. And our active efforts are going to bring it against. There's a question to review. We'll move on here.
Guys, just going back because I was answering questions. At the top, at the peak of the action potential, the sodium channels, I believe, are slow closing. Um, so it takes a second, and then potassium also has like the free leaky channels, so then it starts to repolarize. It's always like leaking out of the potassium channels, but once the sodium gates completely close again because there's like a delay, like they're slow closing, um, then there's the repolarization phase. And normally you can't have like an action potential. You definitely can't in the absolute refractory period, but once relative refractory period, if there is a high enough stimulus, like it can potentially start another action potential, but that doesn't typically happen much ever, if that helps.
Yeah, what she said. Thank you. This isn't my greatest topic, so I'm sorry if I confused anyone. Any more questions on that?
Oh, I see in the chat. Let's see. So the sodium channels, basically they're like these channels don't know what they're doing, but once they meet like it's based on like the charges on either side, right? So once sodium gets depolarized to a certain level, the gates start like they begin to close immediately, right? But they're slow closing. So once they finally close, then you which is near like relative refractory period time, then you can have another action potential. But that's very rare. You have to have an extremely there has to be like a lot of depolarization and I'm sorry, wait, that sounded I'm probably wording that wrong.
You get
But
a
does
lot
that
of
make
different
sense?
signals from a lot of different axons at once, and that could trigger
Yes,
it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so the membrane does at the end of like the action potential at the very top there, I'm sorry, of the depolarization, the membrane potential does go more towards K plus, right? Because K
Yeah.
plus is more negative resting membrane potential. So as soon as it's that high, then K plus is selfish or potassium is selfish, and it's like, I want it to go to my resting membrane potential. So then it starts um, like flooding in the opposite direction and leaving so that the membrane potential gets more negative. Does that help?
Pretty much right at this spike, you're going to shift away from uh, sodium conductance and towards potassium. There is more bicarb outside. So, there's good charts in your notes in the slides that have the numbers that they like. So I would just basically memorize that. You're going to need that for a lot of things. So good to get it down now. Um, we're all good. Let's do it. Yeah. So there's a certain period of time after they shut where they cannot be opened. Um, as soon as they can be opened, that's where you go from that absolute phase to that relative refractory. All good there? Cool. Very nice. Sorry, that was really quick. But yeah, it's acetylcholine. Acetylcholine's gonna trigger your neuromuscular junction. Nicotinic receptors. Uh, yeah, and you'll get more onto how that works in musculoskeletal nodes. GABA is inhibitory in the central nervous system. It doesn't work on. So I'm gonna get into stuff like that. All right, keep moving. All good stuff to know that you're thinking ahead. Nice. Wasn't sure if this is a little out of scope for you guys, but you guys got it. Lysine, I believe, is inhibitory in the spinal cord. I think so. You don't need to know where, but yeah, cover this is good. Okay. I don't remember covering this stuff in early physio, so that's why I thought it does inhibit stuff. That's what I would know. It's good. Keep it moving. Yeah, GABA is definitely a more major inhibitory. So I should be experts now. All right. I feel like we went over that one pretty well. If you still have questions, though, shoot. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Action potential would cause this. I guess it's the first physical thing, non-electrical. I guess it is electrical too, but yeah. So presynaptic is where the signal is coming from, and postsynaptic is where it's going. So if a nerve goes to a muscle, presynaptic is the end of the nerve that's like touching uh, the muscle side, and postsynaptic is the muscle side that's receiving the signal, receiving the neurotransmitters, the acetylcholine. Yeah, the neuromuscular junction is a good example of this. Other nerves are similar, but this is the classic example. Acetylcholine works there. Other synapses use other neurotransmitters, but I believe you're just talking about the neuromuscular junction right now. All right. I think we only have a few more. So, botulism toxin. It's what they call Botox. Yeah, no wrinkles. But it is a toxin made by bacteria, Clostridium botulinum. You'll get into that in micro. Uh, but yeah, the way I always remember this is botulism bottles. It bottles up acetylcholine. Yep, leaves those snare proteins. Little extra bonus points for you. I doubt snare proteins are coming up, but it's a good thing to know. Yep. Yeah, but if you see a question stem with badly canned food, think botulism toxin. There's a chart in here that covers all of them. Is that yeah, yeah. So yeah, red would be curare competitive antagonist of the nicotinic receptor. So this is postsynaptic blocks. Yeah. So we cover botulism toxin, bottles up the acetylcholine presynaptically. It never enters that space. So the postsynaptic end never receives acetylcholine. Curare blocks the nicotinic receptors postsynaptically. So you're still releasing acetylcholine into the space, but the receptors are blocked. So the signal's never received. Neostigmine. Uh, if they ever mention myasthenia gravis, click on the thing that says that ends in stigmine. Um, basically, acetylcholine esterase breaks down the acetylcholine, just a natural process so that we don't have signals constantly firing. Um, myasthenia gravis, you don't have a lot of those receptors are blocked, so the signals don't get through. So if you leave more acetylcholine in the space by inhibiting the enzyme that breaks it down, acetylcholine esterase, that's going to lead to more prolonged signals, and more signals make it through. Yep. Yep. Reversible acetylcholine esterase. Exactly. And then this one, hemiclonium. So after acetylcholine is broken down, it's recycled. Components of it are recycled. And this blocks the reuptake of the choline part, acetylcholine. So then it's gonna be harder to make more of it. So it's gonna decrease your acetylcholine over time. Right, any questions there? Yes, that would help lower the firing rates. I'm not sure exactly what you give it for. I'm sure. We're probably gonna have to win that this year. All right, anything else? No, this is the last one. Woo, 19 in a row. So the way I like to think about this is it's kind of similar to liquid. Like if you have a little tiny hose and you're trying to get a bunch of water through, like imagine like 100-gallon tank and you're trying to fill up a pool from it. If you have a little hose, it's going to take forever for all that to get through. But if you widen the diameter of that tube, more of it's going to get through. It's all going to get through faster. And same thing, myelin insulates the sides. So I always think if you have a nice solid tube without holes in it, it's also going to shoot along faster. Just the concepts. Yeah, that's how it is in my mind. If my examples make any sense to you, that's nice. If not, I might be the weird one. Yeah. But yeah, for each mod, or at least for our exams, they would always give us equations that you need to know, and which ones you need to know mathematically. So I would just know that conceptually. We have a little bonus question to test your guys' culture. Good job. No one went for horseradish. But yeah, mayonnaise is classic. All right, that ends our questions. Um, so in general, if you guys have questions that you come up with over the next couple days, please submit it in that link. We're gonna try to do something on Sunday, whether it's just answer all your questions by then or hop back on here. I don't know what the plan is yet. But yeah, that link in one of the emails I sent out. So a Google form. If you have questions, fill that out and yeah, we'll try to email you back.
I have a quick question, sorry.
Yeah.
Is it possible if you can quickly go over like the driving force?
Oh yeah, so you're saying for each ion?
Yes.
I think I made a question. You guys don't mind spoilers for the review. So like these ions, is what you're talking about?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So these are the equilibrium potentials for each ion. Again, this is what's in Costanzo. Go off their notes. But essentially, uh, each ion just wants to move down its concentration gradient and wants to move towards that potential. Because sodium's positive, it wants to enter the cell, which would make it positive. Calcium wants to enter the cell because there's so much outside, there's almost nothing inside. It wants to move into the cell, make the cell positive. Potassium is inside the cell mostly. It wants to leave the cell. So by doing that, you decrease the positive charge in the cell, which makes the cell negative. And for chloride is high outside the cell as well. That wants to flow into the cell. And that would directly lower the charge by adding the negative charges.
So we always want to make this cell more negative inside.
So I guess there's no want, but each ion wants to flow down, or not want. Each ion wants to, I should say, is going to move down its concentration gradient if there's no active transport interfering with it. So if let's say a cell lost all its ATP and we don't, and it can't use any ATPases anymore. The sodium potassium pump's not going to work. The sodium calcium pump's not going to work. The chloride channels are not going to work. And over time, you're going to get more sodium in the cell. You're going to get more calcium in the cell. You're going to get more potassium outside the cell. And you're going to get more chloride inside the cell. It's basically those ratios where there's 30 times outside the cell than inside the cell, they're going to get more balance. And it's just a result of the charge on the ion that's going to drive it towards these values.
So guys, at the height of the action potential, what is the membrane at? Like number wise, around how positive is it? Or just what's its level at? Okay. So if you see that number, that's inside the cell, right? So based on the numbers that we have, potassium it likes to be at -95, which is where around resting membrane potential. That's where the cell is at equilibrium, right? So when you depolarize, and you get to that height of the action potential at around +30, K plus or potassium is like, hell no, like I don't want the membrane to be like this. I want to shoot back down to where I like to be at -95, or -90, whatever they tell you. So, I hope that makes more sense because before it was harder to explain without this chart, but definitely know that for the exam.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing those numbers should let you know which way the ions are flowing in terms of the non-active component, like when channels are just open and they're allowed to flow. So like you set up here, you have a positive value. You freely open the potassium channels. Potassium is then going to drive it towards its value, -90. So it shifts it down towards that value. I didn't record it. No.
Sorry, coming back to my question real quick, sorry. For like the driving force, do we always have to plug it in the formula and compare the resting membrane potential to that value we got, or we don't have to put it in?
I never used an equation. Basically, that question kind of deals with that. So basically, if they give you a value, any value, you should be able to take that value and determine which way each of the ions are moving. So in the question here, it gives you a value of -50. So -50, you come over here. Like, okay, it's -50 now. Chloride wants to be at -90. So chloride's going to move in the direction that brings this closer to -90.
So
which
that means
would
chloride will come in to the cell,
exactly
more negative.
because it would go in and bring it down. Okay, how about calcium? Which way would calcium move?
That will move out of the cell to make close to +120. No, sorry.
Yep, it would move into the cell because it wants
Make
to be
it-
it wants to make it positive.
So we don't have to use the formula at all.
I never did
Just
the
like-
math for this. It's a lot of physio is it's qualitative.
I'm talking about the driving force formula, the EM negative E ion.
I think it's basically a derivative of this. I'm not entirely sure. I can look at it and get back to
Because
you.
I was doing the questions for supplemental for this week, and then that's how I kind of get stuck at it. Because I put it in a formula and I was thinking like where it would go based on the
Yeah,
mana
I
potential.
think the formula is just derived like what we just did. The
Yes.
formula is that logic.
So just
So
based
if you
on like,
can-
you know, what with the values we have, just kind of like look at these numbers, not the formula.
Yeah, I think a lot of physio, instead of like memorizing these equations, if you just get the concept down, that's all the equation
Got
is telling you.
Got it. Like,
Yeah.
do we have to memorize any equations, you think?
I would definitely go over the equations that they sent out. Before every exam, they send out a list of equations
Oh,
to look
okay.
at, but it's mostly, like I said, qualitative equations
Got it.
that you have to
Got
know.
it. Thank you.
There's going to be in the future, there's going to be some math, but they'll let you know which ones those are.
Got it. Erica
Um,
has a question, and this I also
yeah.
have the same question. If you can answer that too, sorry.
There's a question on that. So, what is? Okay. So basically, um, if you're firing a lot of action potentials at one in one area, it's going to be less sensitive over time. It's like how your body gets used to things, it gets desensitized. So there's I think that's a different one. That so this one of these hyperkalemia, this hyperkalemia. Okay. So so basically, in a state of hyperkalemia, you just make sure I'm saying this right. So yeah, hyperkalemia shifts you towards it slightly depolarizes the cell, making it easier for you to have an action potential. It brings you closer to threshold. So in someone with hyperkalemia, they're probably going to reach threshold more often. And because of that, it kind of gets a little overstimulated. So your body reacts by desensitizing it. Yeah, and it does that by increasing sodium channel inactivation. So if they're inactivated more or longer, it's going to be harder. It's going to be in that absolute refractory and even relative refractory periods for longer. Does that make sense?
So is it because
Erica?
like is it because the potassium cannot go out because we have a lot outside, and
It decreases the drive for potassium to leave.
and
So
then that
that
means
hyperpolarizing force that's trying to bring it down all the time is lessened. It's still there, but it's less.
does that
So
mean
it's,
that the cell is more closer to the threshold, like more negative inside?
it's closer to threshold, but that means it's more positive. So it's like slightly less negative. It
Yep.
might sit at -50 instead of -70.
Got
So if you're reaching threshold, it's the nine. So change. Yes, exactly, Erica. Of course. So in this case, this closes more. Yeah, so it keeps them closed and keeps them inactivated more. Any other questions? Oh, we've gone past 8. So any last minute questions?
Yeah, quickly, sorry. Let's say if we have like CaCl2 in a solution in NaCl, how does that differentiate the osmotic pressure for each?
Oh, what was that again?
So if you have a CaCl2 in a solution
Okay.
and NaCl in a solution,
Mhm.
how does that differentiate the osmotic pressure for each two? Like where would the water flow, you know?
So think up here is a good example of this. So it's a math question, but I think it tests it well. These are the two molecules you're talking about, right? CaCl2 and NaCl.
Yes. Yes, if like based on like osmosis,
Yeah.
where will the osmotic pressure be high and low?
So in this scenario, you want to do for this question, learning that. But basically, each of these compounds are going to dissociate. So when you put them in water. So this is going to turn into 3 molecules. And this is going to turn into 2 molecules. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you have equal amounts of these two, then the one with 3 molecules, 3 osmotically active molecules, is going to draw more water.
So it will pull water towards itself, right?
Yeah.
Because
Um,
there's
yeah,
more
yeah.
osmolarity and you want to make it even.
Yeah, in general, forces lean towards equal osmolarity by the movement of water, not ions. But in a case like this, you have to factor the math into it. So you have 3 ions, multiply that by 50, so that's like 150. And down here it's 75 with 2 uh, osmotically active atoms. So this is also going to be 150. So that's what that's what this answers.
Got it. Thank you
75
so
cents
much.
to yeah.
Thank you. Got it.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So if you guys have any more questions, please submit it in that form and we'll try to chunk out as much as we can. Any tips? I would go through, I always liked going through each objective, make sure I know what each one's about. I thought that was the most thorough way not to miss anything. And in general, the objectives follow Costanzo pretty well. Like each paragraph is an objective a lot of the times. So that's what I like doing. And then at the end, just hammer out as many practice questions you can. The more stuff you get wrong, the more stuff you're going to want to go back over. Yes. And I yield slides are good. So, yeah, the questions they make are most reflective of the test. We try to make good questions, but we can't read their minds. You have any of the resources that they have out. Okay. And the more similar to class, the more it's probably going to correlate to the exam. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. Everyone have a good night.